There is nothing I can do to help you. There is no medication. There's no treatment. There's no cure. And right now, there's no hope.
Our guest today is my dear friend, all the way from New York, Kathe Crawford, a master coach, a business consultant supporting women both personally and professionally. She is passionate about helping women create their life and then work around life. Kathe is also an author of her book, Unlocking Secrets, and is currently working on her next book, Modern Aging. Welcome, Kathe.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita. It's so good to be here and having this conversation with you. I'm really looking forward to it.
I've got to say, I could not put your book down. Definitely a page turner. I was thinking, I've got to read some more. I was just blown away.
Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot to hear, somebody's really engrossed in the story and really diving deep. So thank you.
It was definitely a page turner.
It was my life.
Absolutely. Yeah, your Unlocking Secrets will inspire anyone with your courageous story. So what is one of the most courageous things you've done?
Well, you started at the perfect point, and that was writing the book. And although I never consciously planned to write this book, what the book really represents is probably my greatest act of courage, and that was by sharing my story, which until I really started writing the book, I didn't realize that it was really a secret that I was holding inside. I just thought this was personal. It was my story. But in order to really heal some of the trauma I had been through, I also needed to release that story. So the book.
There is so much to the book, backstory, and so much with the story that you've shared in your book. Could we begin by telling everyone just about the story that you chose to bravely tell in your book, Unlocking Secrets?
Absolutely. So the story is really it centers around it was back in 1988, and my husband Larry and I had been we were sitting in a doctor's office waiting for the results from a life insurance policy. We had recently bought a home, and like all good homeowners and responsible young adults, we applied for life insurance and mortgage insurance and all those insurances that you need. Unfortunately, Larry's policy came back denied. So it was a red flag, and there was certainly so much anxiety around that. We just thought maybe his cholesterol was really high, or he had high blood pressure. We just had no idea. I mean, he was only 32 years old, so what could it possibly be? But that turned out it wasn't the case. So as we were sitting in the doctor's office, and the doctor began to speak, he just said to us, I don't know how to say this to you. I've never really said it to anyone, so I'm just going to say it. And he said, you have AIDS. And there is nothing I can do to help you. There is no medication. There's no treatment. There's no cure. And right now, there's no hope. You will die. And in that moment, I mean, here we were, we were just starting off in life. We thought everything was going to be great and good. And, I was obsessed with a normal life, because to me, everyone looked like they had a normal life, and I wanted in on that. And when we heard those words, I mean, the only thing the doctor said I can tell you to do is go home, get your life in order. If you have children, hug them, keep them close to you, and just prepare yourself for death. And then it was really horrific. He just stood up and then just walked us out of his office. And I just remember like looking at Larry, whose head was in his hands, and the doctor's standing up, and I have my mouth open, and I'm like, there's nothing you can do. I couldn't believe it. I was like, there's got to be something. And he just didn't say a word. And then we just both stood up and walked out of the office. And that was my introduction, and again, it's 1988, I'm hearing about AIDS, and I'm hearing about this horrible virus that's killing people in the hundreds of thousands. And I was one of them, and I just didn't see it coming at all. And then what had happened, we walked back to the car, we're sitting in the car, we're getting ready, and we're both in shock. I mean, we're both in our 30s, our early 30s. We have no idea where this is coming from. And we just looked at one another, and it was so hard, as much as it was, to witness. It was very hard for me to witness your beloved, be given a death sentence. And like, what are the right words? What do you say? And at that moment, we realized I had just had a baby. Did the baby have AIDS? Did I have AIDS? So many questions then started flooding. But we never said anything. It was weird. It was just like we just gazed in each other's eyes, and we knew. We just knew this was going to be something that would redefine our lives. And I had to get back home. My mom was watching the kids. Had a newborn baby, and I had a 5-year-old son. And he said, "Just do me one favor. When we get home, just don't say anything. Don't say anything to your mom, to your bestie. Let's hold this until we find out more information." And of course, I was like, of course. And that's really when The Secret and this whole story began, because I never said another word for decades. Never said another word. Never told the children. Never told our families.
So how did it come about that Larry did get AIDS?
Well, that is when, again, the story becomes even more courageous. And it was because Larry was a recovered heroin addict. And it was one thing, to really come to terms with what that addiction had done for him. Of course, when, during this time, he was clean, he had been in recovery, but these were so the languaging back then was, so this was the sins of a poor and horrible lifestyle. If you were gay, you were a heroin addict, people who were getting AIDS deserved to die. So, I wasn't finding too much comfort or compassion in the community or anything around AIDS. In fact, Larry didn't actually have AIDS. He actually had HIV. But at that time, there was no distinction even. And so, it was going to be one thing to tell people or share with people that Larry had AIDS. But then the next follow-up question was, how did he get it? And that was a story in itself. And that was in my relationship with Larry, probably the most difficult part of our relationship was living through the drug years. So to go back to the beginning of the story, here I thought life had gotten back on track. Things were normal. I had my second baby. We just bought a house. Life was going to be great. And here we get this blow, this game changer that thoroughly devastated us. Those were the only words.
So with that in mind, and Larry actually told you not to tell anyone, how did you manage and cope? There was no one you turned to. How did you manage? Was there someone you turned to for support, strength?
No. I had to turn inward, and I had to find the courage. And at the same time, I had to find how was I going to survive. But it wasn't my survival I was concerned about. It was my 2 children. So even though I couldn't turn to them and have these conversations, just looking at them, being their mom, being so responsible for them is really what gave me my drive and courage to just keep moving forward. At the same time, it was a double-edged sword because I was trying to move forward to protect my children, maintain a life for them and normal, because I knew they were going to lose their dad. And that in itself was going to be very difficult. And yet I were living with their dad or living with Larry. And it's like, how do I not make him feel like an outcast as the community was doing, let's say with AIDS, being a recovered heroin addict. I mean, and now he's going to be in his own home, and the people that love him turn their backs on him. No, it wasn't going to happen. So it was really a juggling act of love.
Yes. Tell me about the time when Larry was in rehab. How did that affect you?
Well, Larry actually didn't quite wind up in rehab. He actually wound up in jail. So jail was like his rehab. We were probably about 2 to 3 years into being married, and I had just had my older son, who also, his name is Larry, and I just thought, I really did. I was very naive to heroin and to addiction. It was the 80s. We had all dibbled and dabbled and drank and did a little of this and a little of that. But I never went across the line. And so when I met Larry, he was clean. I was aware that he was recovered, but I just didn't really understand the depths of addiction. And as he started to fall off, he had been living in Seattle and he moved back to New York. This is where I met him. What started to happen after a year or so, where the old friends started creeping back into his life, the other addicts and the other people. And before you knew it, a little dibble and dabble, he was back to his addiction. And I was pregnant, and I thought that would make it better, and gave a lot of ultimatums and things like that. But when the baby was born, I just said to him, I said, I cannot live like this anymore. It's me, the baby, or it's your drugs. And he said, I can't do this to you. It's a dirty life. It's a disgusting life. He said, and I'm not going to do that to my son or to you. And we split up, and he left. And it was really bittersweet. It wasn't like we didn't love each other. There was this huge fight, but it was really an ugly world. And I knew in my heart, as difficult as it was, that I had to let him go. And I grew up in a household where codependency was rapid. So here I was, spending the first few years trying to fix him, make it all better, and I couldn't. And I had to let him go. And that was really tough. And when I let him go, of course, is what I talk about a lot now, is that I had to let him go, and he failed. And he failed. And he really hit the streets, and he hit it hard. And, in those days, and I'm sure it's still like that, stealing and survival when you're living out on the streets, and he wound up in jail. And jail was exactly what had really set him straight, because, and I share this because there's so many people out there that are functioning addicts. Functioning addicts. You would have no idea that your neighbor next door is totally strung out or is taking some form of drug to numb themselves, whether it's alcohol, Oxycontin, cocaine, whatever. I don't even know now really what so much the drugs of choice are, meth, things like that. And you just don't have any idea, because we picture, people out on the streets, right? Drug addicts laying in the alley. And Larry was never that until he really hit that rock bottom. And because of his time, which was really brief, and it wasn't like he was in like a major prison or anything like that. He was probably in a county jail. And it was enough to straighten him out. And that's when we got back together. I did give it time, and I saw the window of opportunity. Oh my God, this is so great. And, I'm going to bring our family back together. My son is going to have a father, and I'm going to, be back with the man that I really, really, truly love. And that's when we bought the house. And then, we pick up the phone, and You've been denied for a life insurance policy. And it just started all over again.
So, was there any help available, or was it really under the radar? People are too scared to admit they had HIV or AIDS. I know it was a tough time in the 80s, but was there help available for Larry?
No, not at first. It probably took almost 5 years before we even found any sort of. First of all, it took us forever to even find a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody treating AIDS. There was just nobody. They were still doing research. It was really like, it's so similar what is happening now with COVID and the pandemic. And, this is what it was. I mean, it was, but the problem that we faced, not just I, but the whole world, and was, nobody was, the governments and the drug companies, nobody cared. Nobody cared. And I have to tell you that at that time, the only community that was able to really support me, which I did have to, I did share, because I'm trying to get medical help. And what do we do? Because I made this promise to Larry that I would not allow anything to happen to him, that we were going to fight this and figure it out. It was the gay community. And there was some really amazing community action, especially, in New York City. We had Project Inform out of San Francisco. We had the Gay Men's Crisis Center. They were doing the work. They were, protesting and sitting in front of the Senate, and they were getting hearings and really trying to create this into a movement. So because people were just dying in the streets. I mean, St. Vincent's Hospital looked like 9/11. People were just lined up. There were no beds. There was no help. There was nothing they can do. And people were dying. It was averaging like 6 weeks to 6 months after they were diagnosed. Fortunately, Larry, unbelievably, I think with his will to live, lived almost 8 years before it really took over his physical body. A community, that's, we didn't even have it defined the way it is now, LGBTQ, right? It was, it was, I don't even, I just called it, gave the, and it was, if it wasn't for them, I would have had no direction at all. So I mentioned the names of the programs. It was the Hyacinth Foundation, and it's so interesting. Sometimes I walk through a street fair and I see, their booth, and really doing community service and bringing information to the forefront. So that was really, that was a little winded, but that is really who helped us.
Oh, that's, at least there was some support out there. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, I was afraid they would send me, well, we'll send you information. And I was even afraid to have mail sent to the house, because I didn't even want the postal man to have any inclination. This is how secretive it was.
And that couldn't have been easy. It's like there's not sharing and getting the support for yourselves. It's a tough time.
It was. And Larry also, he didn't really talk about it. He didn't, I mean, now, years later, I can only imagine, how do you face death? I mean, that's what he had to wake up to every day. And I, of course, was always nervous that this was going to lead him back to his addiction. I mean, if I was given a death sentence and I knew I was going to die, and I didn't know when I was going to die or how I was going to die, and plus, AIDS was not an easy death. I was always the nagging wife, like, what'd you do today? Where'd you go? If he was smoking cigarettes, you can't smoke cigarettes. That's bad for your lungs. Or if you have a beer, this is going to help. This is going to like ruin your immune system. And I was always on him. Yeah, I had to do it. I tried my best to do it with a lot of kindness and compassion.
How does it feel now to have shared and got your story out there? Because it's a huge story.
When I first wrote the book's been out now, I guess about 3 or 4 years. And even when I first wrote the book, I almost went back into hiding. I still didn't realize how much shame I was still carrying. Because, you know, what happens to most of us, and I can't speak for everyone, but to most of us, when we're in a situation like that, we've been brought up in a family, maybe someone was an alcoholic, or we've been raped or sexually abused, or something really traumatic has happened to us. Even though we did not do anything, we carry a lot of the guilt and the shame. And it was so revealing that even though, I had, eventually, we had told my parents before Larry had passed, and we told his parents, and there was a very small, really close family that knew what had really happened. I really owned it. It was like I was the heroin addict. I was the one who had AIDS. And I carried that because I felt, I guess, having my two children, that I was causing a lot of pain to everyone around me. Had I not made that decision, had I not married Larry, had I not taken Larry back after the drug years, there was so many things that I was just thought I had really come to terms with, but I still was not processed. There was still so much. So I felt like, in a way, most authors, they come out with a book and they're like really ready to talk about it and promote it. And I was, but I found that I had to do that much more intimately. I wasn't ready to shout it out to the world.
Yes, I could totally understand. How does it feel just to know that you have shared something so vulnerable?
Fast forward to now, to me having this conversation with you, what I have learned in the last few years is how much we are all alike. That everyone has a story. Everyone has overcome something, or someone is carrying something. And what I have found, I have so many people who have reached out to me and have said, "You have given me the courage. You have given me permission that it's okay." And it's the underneath, it's the underbelly of what I lost myself in those years, right? But the thing that was really powerful, I believe, in my story was Larry died in 1996. I mean, fast forward like 2017, 2016, just a few short years ago, right? I still wasn't telling anyone. I mean, people that I worked with, I had built like an incredible career. I was working for these amazing luxury global brands, traveling the globe. I mean, there I was, this, innocent 30-year-old something woman who was just happy to, have a really simple and easy life. Just take care of my two kids, love my husband. I didn't have these grand plans for my life the way it turned out. And now, the woman that first published that book, who was like so uncertain of what this would bring forth into the world, has helped so many people. So I really enjoy telling the story now and sharing my experience, because I get so many emails and feedback and people reaching out and say, "How do I do that? How do I do that?"
You waited 20 years to tell your story. You lived this and then held it close to you for so long. What made you ready to speak your truth?
That was the journey. The book is Unlocking Secrets, but the real title is my journey to my journey to an open heart. And after Larry passed, I had thought, because it was almost 8 years, and living with that secret and these double identities, duality, and I said, well, when this all comes to an end, I'm gonna really, life's gonna be okay. I'm gonna be able to get back on track. And what I really learned was life spun out of control. I had no idea what death and dying was all about. I had no idea what grief was. I had spent the last 8 years, instead of really, I don't want to say Well, I spent the last 8 years,
Mm.
instead of dealing with probably the things that would have helped me after his passing, I was I was always trying to hold everything together. So I never really worked on my own feelings and what was happening. It was always about Larry and my kids and my job. And so after he passed, life got incredibly, incredibly difficult. I went, to therapy. I tried every kind of drug. I wound up even on lithium because I was so unstable. But you can't go through life as a single mom raising two kids and trying to hold down a job on
Mm.
lithium. And I knew that wasn't the answer. And mind you, I hated drugs because to me they ruined our lives.
Mm.
So then I just kept searching. I was taking, it was also in the early 90s, everything was about work and, self improvement and, who moved the cheese and Tony Robbins and, all this inspiration. I
Mm.
kept saying, what am I not doing? What am I not seeing? I spent a lot of time in therapy with different therapists. And then I had finally found a really, it was decades later, it was probably about 15 years later, I found a really great therapist. And in his office, I found a really special book, and it's called, and I always talk about it because it changed my life, and so did
Mhm.
John, was Awakening from Grief. And,
Mm.
I was like, I saw the book, my therapist said, take it, read it. And it wasn't just about grief and in the death sense, it was about all the losses that we face over a lifetime. And I read
Mm.
that book, and I knew at that moment that this gentleman, John Walshin, who wrote the book, I needed to get in touch with him. And it turned out that he lived right in New Jersey, and he did meditation classes, and I went, and I was in search of
Mm.
John, and I met John and began working with him, and that is when my spiritual quest began. From there, I just went deeper and deeper. But meditation was really what had changed my life and changed the course. It was what, I don't want to use the term, but it was really what I needed. It was the
Mm.
going in and the self reflection and coming to terms with what had happened and acknowledging that I didn't have to, it was traumatic and I didn't have
Mhm.
to be strong. I could be a real human being. So
Mm.
from there, that's, all the workshops, uh, the yoga. Then I became a yoga teacher, and I was really doing a lot of deep work. And I had always had the psychological. I love psychology, and I
Mm.
really married the Eastern philosophies with Western psychology, and it really was. It made the difference. And
That's beautiful. Yes. Secrets can keep us company in many ways. Was there grief in saying goodbye to this secret?
absolutely, I had. It was horrible because that's the only word I could use. I was like, well, who am I without my story? And that secret was a secret really of love because I had promised Larry I would never say a word. So by doing this, I was like, was I violating his trust? And of course, by then, that wasn't what it was about. But it was
Mm.
my story, and who was I without my story? So it was really difficult to share that.
Yes. What do you recommend to anyone who is living in secrets and shame? How can they begin to break through it?
You've got to go in. It's really not about the circumstances and all the external things that happen. It's really about how we respond to all of those challenges and changes and trauma that's happening around us. We try to
Mm.
control it. We try to fix it. We really try to skim over it and make it better.
Mm.
But the only way we really get to it is to really go inside. And that's not something that just happens overnight. And everybody's journey is different. And so for me, I went the traditional route. I went to, grief widows groups and, took my kids to art therapy and one-on-one, took meditation, read every book imaginable. And then as I said, for me, it was really the spiritual journey. But in that spiritual journey, however it looks, it's about going in. It's really about going in. And the truth is really what resides inside. And as much as I thought I was so raw and so real, I was denying myself. My own truth was the secret. It was speaking my truth. So if you're, I don't give advice, but I say that if you're really trying to come out of something and really stand in your truth and be strong and powerful, and, people go, I don't know what my purpose is or my passion. It's just really just go and look inside, because it's all there. Mine was just covered in a sheet of armor for protection.
Yes. And it is always about protecting ourselves without realizing that's the one thing we need to break down.
So many people after reading the book say, and I was so happy. They were like, this is such a beautiful love story, because I was so afraid because of course I was shrouded in guilt and rejection and, oh my God, what will they think? And they were like, it's a love story. And yes, it was a love story about my children and Larry, but it was a love story of learning how to love myself. And what I learned along that way was, until we learn to love ourselves, we cannot give love, be love, see love. It's clouded. So when we can really love ourselves unconditionally, instead of looking for that love, which I had always been looking for, that unconditional love from my parents, from people, from approval, from everyone on the outside, I had to really love myself unconditionally. And that's why it took so many years for me to really understand that and to really do it. I kept saying, I know it, but someone's going to come along and rescue me and save me, and I'm going to fall in love again, and or my children will be my love for the rest of my life. And I would use all the external people and things, but the truth is, and that is really for me, the secret is learning to love yourself.
What would you say to anyone that is going through something similar to you? How can they get help? I mean, I know you've talked about all the different classes you have done and help support, but is there more help now for anything like HIV, AIDS?
Oh, absolutely. It is amazing. And I mean, I just actually did a talk in Canada, because I was so nervous, because I was speaking to people who were living with HIV. The languaging, we don't say someone has AIDS or has HIV. They're living, because they are living, right? Back then, I knew that languaging as really like as a death sentence. So, I mean, I ride the subways and there's, posters, for pills and things that you can do. And I think just recently in the news, they used the word cured somebody, a woman from AIDS. So it's out there. But I would say someone who is really, whatever it is, in the work that I do now with women and helping them find their voice and releasing that shame, the first thing and was the one thing that really is so important is to find someone you can talk to. Find someone you can share your truth with. And it doesn't mean that you're sharing it because you need an answer or you need to be fixed or you need a solution, but it's just acknowledging the truth. I had suppressed the truth. I could never say Larry was a heroin addict. Larry, had been diagnosed with AIDS. I mean, my throat would literally close. I mean, I did so much work around that and speaking the truth. But the first step was finding someone. And when I really found someone that I could share that with, not necessarily like a professional it can be, but when I found the person that I was able to really say what happened, it was like the weight of the world came off of me. Nothing went away, but that weight shifted. I wasn't carrying this all alone. There's so many people, and especially now with this pandemic and what we're all living through, like we're not together in community like we were. It's a different way of living, and connection is so important. And there's so many people out there who are just alone. And you'd be caught, but they choose to. Actually, if you look at my story, I mean, I chose to do this alone. Well, I didn't get any medals at the end of it. It didn't make me a better person. I thought it did. But looking back now, absolutely not. I've lost so many years.
Yes, that's the other thing. It's finding someone that you can confide in and sharing. It really is, an absolute journey.
That's really the first step. And whether it's a therapist, a coach, your mom, a family member, a really good friend. And that is really where it started for me, was a really dear friend. And she really, really supported me. And she was like, you have got to tell your parents. You have got to tell. I mean, I remember right before Larry was passing, like when because he never really got sick, which was wonderful, or had never even actually got AIDS. He never broke this, there's a level like 250, I think, is your T cell count, and he never went below, but he did develop cancer. And so it was a very easy explanation as to how did your husband die? Well, he died of cancer. People don't question that. And I remember saying to Larry, you have got to tell your mother. I mean, you cannot leave me with that. Like, there was so much responsibility that I had taken on. Yeah. And I remember, and she said that to me, when she heard the story, and that was just even a little tiny piece of it. So getting that support is just it's so necessary. It's not even something that I want to even convince you to do. If you live your life, you have got to come forward and talk to somebody safe.
Yeah, it's so important to heal. Yes.
I wasted, like I said, and it wasn't a waste. I mean, believe me, it was a great journey, and you'll read about it in the book. And each one was like a breadcrumb, and it led me to the next, and it led me to the next. But I was always, from the time I was little, I was always the seeker. I always had a very deep relationship to God, to spirituality, and I knew that I had been placed on this earth, that there was something bigger. And it's like, is that ego talking, or is that really a calling? And that can be confusing, right? In this world, it's like, is this my ego saying, there's a bigger purpose for me, even though we all talk about what's my purpose? How can I make a big impact in the world? Well, here I am. It's like, Larry, because it was Valentine's Day, Larry actually died on Valentine's Day, and we just celebrated his life. It was 26 years. And look at the work that I'm doing, the difference that I'm making in the world, and it's, who would have known that in this 30-year-old girl who was like, why was I given all this? Why was this happening to me? And my two boys have grown up and become fabulous men, and life is good. Yes. But you would have never thought that. You could never have convinced me that life would turn out okay. But you have to be patient. It'll show you in time.
Where can the listeners get your book and find you online? And what's your website?
My website is KatheCrawford.com. I spell my name with the E, so it's Kathe, K-T-H-E, Crawford. My book is on Amazon. It's also on most Goodreads and all the different book selling sites. And I think, you have the one in the UK, there's a specific, I'll put it in the we'll give it to you for the show notes, but you can get it. But primarily on Amazon. And sign up for my newsletter. So the work that I'm doing now, which is really, I'm so lit up about, is what's the next chapter? Where am I going? Right now, all of that was happening to me very early on, my 30s, 40s, even my 50s. Well, I'm now in my 60s, and I'm on another journey. Journeys don't stop. The hero, we can look at this like the hero story, right? That, here I was, I got through all this adversity, and now I've come full circle and I'm still standing. But I really believe the true hero's journey is when we go on to the next journey.
Yeah.
So I'm really doing a lot of work because I work with so many women that are powerful women. They're still standing and they've had so much adversity, but they still want to do more impactful work and they still want to learn and grow. So now I'm really studying and working and doing work around transition and midlife, and how, the old model of growing old no longer works. I mean, it's a different world. We learn till we're 25, we earn till we're 65, and then we retire. I am just getting started, and I know women out there are very similar to myself, are just getting started in their 50s, 40s. So,
yeah, I definitely am looking forward to your new book. Thank you for sharing your deep, insightful wisdom and knowledge and doing the work on yourself so you can make a difference for others. I'd really like to acknowledge you for that, Kathe Crawford.
thank you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
What is your definition of courage?
Is speaking your truth and really living a truthful life. Living a life with integrity to your morals, your values, and speaking up for yourself is a courageous act.